the national conversation has moved on the strikes and the protest by the government servants. There are two sides to this story. One is when we check the poverty line, according to 2024 May data from the census and statistics, per person the minimum expenditure at the national level is about 16,300 rupees. That means for a household of 4, at least you need about 65,000 only for your minimum expenditure. Then when we compare that amount with the government salary structure, and when we looked at it, we realize the government servant structure is basically, we have about 1.3 million government servants, and it's mainly tail heavy. And majority of the government servants are the office assistants, and their salary scale generally ranging from about 45,000 to 75,000, while our national poverty line at the national level is about 65,000 for a 4-member household. So in that context, on one side, of course, the government servants are struggling because their salary scales are so low with the high cost of living on one side, and the other side, the state or the treasury really do not have any money left to increase the salaries, because if they were to allow this salary increment or the living expenditure allowance increment, it requires about 220 billion rupees. 220 billion rupees, that is pretty much more than 100% of the total collection of the payee or the APIT tax. What we all collect from everyone from the private sector by paying their payee to the government is about 160 billion rupees. Just for this increment, it requires 220 billion rupees. So that means even if we increase the payee tax or the APIT tax by 100%, it may still not adequate to cover this increment. So what are the solutions available? The other solution is we can increase the VAT. Of course, that will shrink the economy on one side, and on the other side, that will also increase some of the essential goods and services. There is another option, that is increasing the corporate tax. That's already at 30%. We have to increase corporate tax to about 40%. Of course, that will shrink the economy on the other side, and a lot of corporates will consider different options to operate the businesses out of Sri Lanka, and there will be a rise in the unemployment. The other option is the government can borrow money to facilitate this increment, but that will increase the interest rates, because 220 billion rupees is quite a lot, and when the interest rates goes up, of course, the businesses and the economy will again be the main culprit of that policy measure if we were to take that. There's one final option that we tested some time ago, that's amending the Central Bank Act and printing the money or borrowing money from the central bank without increasing the salary. Of course, we all had that bitter pill that will increase our inflation without making any sense for the salary increment, like what we saw in the last episode of the economic crisis. So the only available solution as we see is a restructuring of the government servants. We have to first offer an VRS and allowing those who voluntarily want to retire, and slowly bring down the government cadre from 1.3 million to probably about 1 million, then for about 800,000, and ideally to about 600,000, and the saving should go as a salary increment for the rest of the government employees. At the moment, even at the senior level, government officials are getting about between 100,000 to 200,000 salary scale. That is not adequate for them to make or attract the talent who can make senior level decisions. So as a result, we have a top government bureaucrat who are not happy or completely unsatisfied. At the same time, we have a very tail heavy government servant structure. They are also quite unhappy and unsatisfied because their salary scales are pretty much below the poverty line at the household level, or pretty much slightly above the poverty line compared to the household level. So the only solution we have is basically slowly shrinking the size of the government and then give that increment back to the government servants of that saving, because then they will have a dignified salary which contributes back to the economy, and their productivity and efficiency will be increased. The worst case scenario could be, if we continue this stretch, of course we will at one point, not today but in few years time, we will hit a pension crisis, because we really do not have money to service the pensions and the government servant salaries with the rate that these demands are coming in. On the other side, if the government increases the salaries by borrowing money or increasing the taxes or without increasing the taxes, that will also slightly impact the IMF agreement guidelines or the framework provided as at now at a crucial time of debt restructuring. So there's no point complaining about the problem, because problem has two sides. The treasury really do not have money to increase the salaries. On the other side, the current structure, including the teachers of about 250,000 teachers, their salary scales are slightly on par with the national poverty line or below the poverty line. So in that case, we have all stakeholders who are quite unhappy. The only way that we can strike a balance is having a sustainable solution, slowly bringing down the government cadre and also freezing the employment, and then taking step-by-step approach by increasing the government salaries, having some KPIs on them, and then increase the productivity. And that is the only solution as far as we see as at now.
If you are interested in seeing more content like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow Advocata on all social media platforms to never miss out on our latest content. Consider supporting Advocata by becoming an individual subscriber. Gain access to our weekday media monitoring of economic news, exclusive Advocata events, and more. To learn more, visit us at support.advocata.org.